Motion, please, for the adoption of the agenda for the February 5th, 2019 regular meeting of council with the deletion of our delegation E1 and the addition of I1, which is our sundry item concerning the Edson District Recycling Society. Councillor Chenard will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that the minutes of the December 11th, 2019 special meeting of council be adopted as presented? Councillor Bevan will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that the minutes of the January 15th, 2019 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented? Councillor Byer will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, the council adopt the temporary road closure or usage policy as presented and effective immediately?
So,
Councillor Bevan will make that motion. Through to Mr. Darrowcott. Any comments regarding this item?
I don't. I'd maybe invite Al to come up if he has any, or if there's any questions, I would direct them to Mr. Schramm.
Yeah, just back in December 11th at the COW meeting, we had presented this policy for council to review. From that meeting, there would come a couple recommendations for some modifications to the policy, which administration has incorporated. Specifically on the time frame for approvals, we want to streamline that process to make it very easily for people to do this process, and so we made those changes. And the second change we made was dealing with barricades and providing, if the municipality had the ability to provide barricades, we would do so, and we actually put that contact information on. So those are the two changes that had come directly from the committee of the whole meeting of recommendations, and we incorporate those changes, so we're pretty comfortable moving forward.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Schramm. Councillor Chenard and then Councillor Bevan.
yes, I would just like to actually compliment you because this saves a lot of time, because some of the stuff what we're bringing forward to council was the regular routine closures, and I think this cleans it up. It makes it straightforward for anyone planning. It streamlines it, so well done. There's some great improvements.
Councillor Bevan.
Through the chair, Al. They say barricades and that, can they be moved by anybody at any time so people can still go through, or how are we going to monitor that? I know they want them closed off that road, but if they're temporary, somebody runs them over or moves them, how do we monitor that?
Mr. Schramm, go ahead.
Those will always be challenges. Our goal is to obviously provide the event organizer with some barricades that they can set up in strategic locations, especially dealing with parades. To have somebody monitor each barricade could become a bit of a challenge if that was needed. I think traditionally, though, that's not been an issue in our community. People have been very respectful of the barricades, and we really see that as continuing on.
Thank you, Mr. Schramm. Any other further questions? Councillor Sorensen.
I'm not, through the chair, I'm not sure if this was intended, but I still think the barricades should all be Town of Edson with the plaques, like clearly identifying that it's Town of Edson and what bylaw it applies to, or what bylaw is enforceable by that barricade. So I think it still seems open-ended that an event planner could bring their own barricades without any of that information on it.
Mr. Schramm.
Our goal is to provide the barricades for them. We can't predict uncontrolled situations. If there's another situation happening within our community, a water break, for example, or some other major construction issues, we did definitely put it on there. I don't recall any other participants who would use this having barricades of their own. We're pretty confident that they will come to the town first, and based on our availability, we'll provide what we can.
I think too, if I may add to that, that's an opportunity for them on the application to note any circumstances where they may feel they need to use barricades, at which point it may trigger some follow-up questions such as the condition of the barricades and the safety and visibility and those types of things. So I think as Mr. Schramm suggested, we can't account for any possibility, but I think we've set ourselves up to at least trigger some questions and that may address some of those concerns.
All right, thank you. Any other further questions? Councillor Curry and then Councillor Bevan.
I just wanted to make a comment saying I really like how easy this form is. and the helpful tips that come along with it. I think for a lot of the things where we have road closures happening, it's on a volunteer basis kind of organization. So the ease is always nice. Where is it going to be stored? And what are we doing to ensure people know that they have to do this? So just finding the information.
Mr. Sherman?
Our goal is to obviously have it on our website, so we'll advertise it, make sure that people are aware of it. And as people come in, we'll make sure that the town office or whatever department receives those requests will direct them to us. Education is a big part of our goal to get the messaging out. We know our main users in our community is the Chamber of Commerce and the Legion, and we'll approach them directly, letting them know that this new policy is in, because those are the two main ones that come to mind right off the bat. And then any other user that we're aware of, we'll approach them. Really get the message out. That's our goal.
All right, thank you. Any other further questions or comments? Councilor Evan?
Through the chair, Dal. I noticed that on your barricades now, you've gotten rid of the wooden ones, you've gone to all plastic ones now. And they do have the town of Edson written right on them, so they're very legible. And I noticed that the Santa Claus parade, the truck came at the very end and they had them all loaded up with a matter of minutes, and that just folded down. It was a lot nicer. No more wood, no more metal. It's just a way to go on that. And you guys had a lot more out there this year too, so, or last year, I should say. So it was good.
I can't take credit for that. That's our operations department. They look after that and they do a fantastic job, and our community services department as well. So
Yeah, it was very good. Really
All right,
good.
any other further questions, comments, or concerns? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council approve an additional $70,000 from the infrastructure reserve for the Bench Creek
Thank you,
stabilization?
Mr. Mayor, I think you jumped over.
Oh, I wanted to skip
I
that
don't
one.
want to spend.
Can I get a motion, please, that council authorize the town of Edson to enter into an agreement with Alberta Transportation with respect to the 748 Highway 16 intersection widening, and authorize administration to include the town portion of $99,850 in the 2020 operating budget or in a later year as required until the project is complete? And Councillor Chenard will make that motion. And we have Mr. Verhage in front of us. So do you want to give us an overview of what this means?
Mr. Chairman, most of the details are located within the report. The intersection improvements are required for the intersection of First Avenue and Highway 748 in order to mirror what will be changing access across the way and to deal with development within the area. From a town-centric perspective, some of the important pieces that have spurred this are the subdivision, which is proposed and being held pending this signing of the MOU, a developed shop that had a requirement for this to be addressed during its highways permit, as well as an approved by us so far communications tower, which was granted approval by highways, also requiring the closure of this area. Given that level of development, staff are confident with recommending that we take 50% split on the improvements to this area, which would be approximately $100,000. And that MOU addresses the continued liability of the highways to maintain this infrastructure and take it over, manage the project, and then share the cost with us to allow for further development in that area.
All right, thank you, Mr. Verhage. Councillor Byer?
Through the chair to Mr. Verhage. So I'm certainly not familiar with what widening a highway and doing roadwork costs, but $99,000 seems a little bit cheap. What happens if it goes beyond that? How does that work out?
Go ahead, Mr.
Your
Verhage.
Worship, to Councillor Byers. The MOU is written in such a fashion that should the cost be less, which is plausible with the amount of work that highways can muster sometimes, we would benefit from that reduction. If the costs were more, we would also be required to contribute to that. So.
All right, thank you, Councillor Byer. Councillor Chenard?
Yes, I had similar, one of my questions was asked, but in the past, it's been way higher than that. Like, we're looking at almost $1 million widening, so this cost, we're gonna do a proper study, so it is around $100,000. And my other question is, when's the work gonna happen? 2020 budget, so the work was probably gonna happen a year from now then, kind of idea?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Chouinard, the intentions of highways is to see it done by the 2020 period, or in the 2020 period. They, however, leave themselves the leeway to do it later, should their budgets require they do it later. So our intention would be if we budget for the 2020 and it isn't actually required or spent, we would just defer that payment so those funds are there and available for that payment in the future. At least that's.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you.
Derrick.
And I would just may also add, in terms of fear of cost escalations, I think should be partially mitigated by the fact that transportation is on the hook for the other half. So they have no interest in seeing the cost escalate because that impacts them as well. And also in relation to the difference between this intersection and say the intersection on 748 and 40th Street, which costs $1.4 million. The design is significantly less intrusive. What they're requiring here, it's just some minimum widening of those lanes to allow for a turning lane, whereas the intersection at 748 required a lot more work to achieve what was required. So that accounts for the big disparity in cost.
All right. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council approve an additional $70,000 from the infrastructure reserve for the Bench Creek stabilization project?
Mayor, just if I may, just before you make that motion, I just want to add a point of clarity here. I'll invite Dawit to come and join us at the table. But we were working kind of on the fly as we put this forward to get this to council. We didn't want to delay work on the project because there's costs associated with that. And so I just, before that motion, the clarity I would just like to add to this is if council was to select the less aesthetically pleasing outcome of having the sheet piles just capped and remain there, the savings would be about $70,000. So there's an opportunity to remove $70,000 from the project. As it stands right now, unless Dawit has some additional information to add, we're probably looking at about $40,000 over the current budget. So this is one mitigation which would allow us to remain within council's current approved budget. But Dawit, do you have anything that you want to add to that, or would that be appropriate for council to move forward with that conversation?
If council doesn't have any other concern, I think the nutshell of the whole thing is about $40,000.
Okay, so we're getting way into too much in detail here. So $40,000, you don't need 70. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's correct. That would have.
Yeah, it is 40,000. No, this is what it is. The budget. That
Okay, so just wait. Sorry, we're gonna make a motion first, and then we can get into.
Sorry, I
those
just wanted to
discussions,
you'd have that information
So,
before you made the motion.
Can I get a motion, please, that council approve an additional $40,000 from the infrastructure reserve for the Bench Creek Bank stabilization project?
I'm confused though.
This is why we don't have these. This is why we need to have a motion on the table first, then we can
But that's
modify
what
it
I'm saying.
afterwards.
Did you not say we could save 70,000 and we need additional 40, so we shouldn't need? Did I hear
So
you wrong?
that's fine. That motion can be made. It can be defeated with an additional motion being made. An additional motion.
I'm asking for a motion for $40,000. But
an
you can make
additional
whatever motion
can
you
be
would
made.
like.
Yeah. For example, if the chair would entertain a motion to say, I move that we select the lower cost option, which would keep the budget intact, that would be an acceptable motion, I think, at this stage. But
Go ahead, Councillor Sorensen.
I would make the motion that council chooses the lower cost option with exposed sheet piles.
Okay, so that's your motion.
thank you.
I'll call the question. All those in, sorry, yeah. Okay, so now we have a
Now we have
motion on the table.
discussion.
So now we can get into the details of what Mr. Derricotte was getting into, and Mr. Solomon, feel free to elaborate.
Sure, thank you. So I would just add there, we as I said, we were working on the fly there, and we tried to include a few pictures of what exposed sheet pile can and does look like. I want to be clear, this is not exactly what our outcome is going to look like. This is just so that council has an idea of what they're selecting there. The length of this is along the western bank by the RCMP for how many meters is it of sheet piles, Dawit?
It's about 110 thereabouts.
Yeah, so basically from the highway about 100 meters is where this would be exposed. It would vary on water depth. The more water we had, the less you would see, and seasonal, obviously that's part of it as well, so.
Okay, Councillor Chenard.
I'm a little bit confused, looking at these caps, how it would be cheaper to cap rather than putting dirt fill is my first question, because if you're capping this, that's gonna cost money, just painted capping.
So the current, if I may,
Go ahead.
Your Worship, the current solution calls for what is called a scour lock product, which is a filled steel compartment that is built into the bank, and then vegetation actually grows on top of that. And those scour lock blocks are actually quite expensive. So we would be removing those scour lock blocks and instead using the sheet pile that is already there to build that containment. The difference is you don't end up with the vegetated finish at the end.
I have a second question.
Okay, Councillor Curry and then Councillor Swenson.
Can you now clarify my question? So what I heard was, it was gonna be an extra 70,000 if we did this?
No, so if we were to go with the original design, which would be the scour lock blocks, which end up with a vegetated finish, we anticipate it would end up being about $40,000 over the existing budget. If we choose an alternative course of action, which is the proposed exposed sheet pile, we have the opportunity to save approximately $70,000, although Dawit may have some more information on that as he's been chasing down more specific numbers.
So this would, 70,000 less than what our budget was at the last meeting?
It would end up being about $30,000 less because we're anticipating that as designed now would be about $40,000 and beyond that.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan.
I think it's more or less what the CEO, Mr. Terrico, said. What happens is you came here for a budget. That budget was approved. But then that budget, despite having considered some of the claims that the contractor has come up with, the numbers that he is looking at is a little higher. What would mean is, look, you have to give me another, the balance is anyways about $40,000 that he's asking for. So if council is ready to entertain that, then the cost, the final cost, for a moment, keeping the scour lock issue aside, would be another 40,000. So we'll be having the scour lock, we'll be having the type of finish we're looking for, and the project will be completed at that number. But there are other things that need to be looked at. One of the things, for example, that we did not consider in the budget that we brought before, but has come up despite all the information that we have from the technical firm, that we'll be able to push the piles to about 15 meters. That's now another 3 meters, anchoring it into a solid clay below, about 12 meters down. We could not push these piles anything more than between 10 to 11 meters, or even between 9 to 12 meters. So instead of these piles not setting it right where we want them, we now have to cut them for them to be, instead of up and down, for them to be one level. That cost was provided to us just about 2 or 3 days ago by the contractor. Is about $34,800. So this additional cost, if council is not ready to compensate the contractor for the number that he has brought up before us, then the $38,500 will be paid for from the otherwise money that will be going to the contractor. So these are choices that the contractor, the council has to make. What I'm unhappy, again, I think that will be, and camera makes it more easier to discuss it. But what I'm, it's unfortunate, every time I come, obviously I come for money, and it has not been very comfortable to do that. So I hope council will understand this is completely unforeseen cost this 38,400 because from all data that we have, this thing is supposed to be pushed down to where it should be, and then we don't have to cut it. But despite all the heavy vibratory drives that we've been doing, including compromising safety to the RCMP building because it was getting a little too much, we cannot push it where we want it to be. As a result, the cut, as a result of the 38,500 for the $34,800 for which I didn't ask a budget for. So if council decides to pay the contractors extra money that he has asked, whether he's contractually allowed to do that or not would be a matter to discuss if council is interested in that. But then if council decides, okay, pay him off this 40,000 and also expend the 34,800 for the cutting of the pile, we will be looking at $74,800. Now, if we remove the scour lock, which we are estimating at around 70,000, the money that will be coming to council for would be roughly about $4,600, $5,000. So these are now a direction that council need to give, whatever makes council comfortable. I personally don't like the idea of exposing the sheet pile as much as possible. I would cut them as low as I can and have a green feel to it, and that's what the scour locks provide. The reason that I'm saying is a sheet pile on one side of the bank and no sheet pile on the other side of the bank is quite a scene as far as I can see. But it ultimately the decision of council whether no, it's okay, we're okay, just let's have that exposed face, whether it's on the other side too or not, then we can move forward. If council directs that, no, we want an aesthetic thing, then we are looking at a total of about $70,000, $75,000, again, from council. So maybe I don't want to go too detailed, then I confuse you all. If there is any question, I'll be very happy to respond.
Councillor Sorensen and Councillor Wilkinson.
I would just like to understand what the sheet pile is going to look like. And I see pictures here, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm envisioning some green grass right up to a sheet pile, and then more green grass. And on top of the sheet pile, there'll be a steel cap that it looks like in this picture.
So this is cut to the height that would have to the top of the scour lock that we are envisioning to have. If we are, for example, to cut it and go ahead with scour lock, the scour lock would be sticking, embedding about 0.6 of a meter behind the sheet pile and exposing another 0.6 of a meter above the sheet pile. So in that photographs that you saw, it's showing just a very flat thing. So in our case, the sheet pile will be at that height, but then it's sloped at a 4-to-1 towards the RCMP building. So it's a little different, but more or less what you see is probably what you'll get as long as we're paying for what's known as a capping beam. That capping beam, we don't even know the total cost for that yet. So therefore, to say that we are saving 70,000, although it may not be exact, because like the CEO said, we don't have the full number to bring before you. But with a cap not known, if we are to proceed with the cutting of the sheet pile and proceed with the other 1.2 meters of scour lock behind the sheet pile, tying into the embankment of the RCMP, we are looking at a total of about $75,000, including the claims which the contractor is complaining that it should be entertained for.
Can I have a follow-up?
Sure, and then
statement
Councillor
there?
Wilkinson, yeah.
Sure. So if it is green grass level right up to a sheet pile with a steel cap on top and then another level below, I think it would be great for people to sit there and let their legs dangle off and stare at the riparian area, and I think an exposed area could be useful. It could be used for I don't know, it won't be as bad as what.
The only thing I may add to that would be that it would be water, not grass. So there'd be grass up to the top of the sheet pile, and then it would generally be
Right down to the
yeah
water.
the water level, or in the fall or other seasons, the bank. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson, then Councillor Chenard.
Okay, through the chair to Mr. Sullivan, can you tell me what stopped the contractor being able to put the piles down to where he originally thought he'd be able to?
Okay, what happens is I have the geotechnical report. It gives a little picture, but maybe just
Yes,
plainly
whatever,
to
yeah.
explain. We have dug, or we have drilled 4 boreholes, just to be sure that we are covered properly. Now, these evenly interspaced 4 boreholes gave an information to help us assess the type of material that we are penetrating through. And looking at the geotechnical report and the logs, the different styles of soil, the first 12 meters, which are the total depth of our pile is supposed to be just sinking without even an effort. It just hits onto the clay. But the other 3 meters, because they've suggested about 15 meters, is supposed to be anchoring itself into the clay till. But first of all, the clay till in itself is not even, despite what the report says. Because it's not even, when it hits the clay till at one end, then it is higher. Then the next one hits into the clay, but then because of the unevenness goes a little lower. So if you look at the sheet pile currently, you'll see it's up and down, up and down. So that is completely what we did not expect to see. That's why, therefore, we have now to come back to council to ask money to cut those sheet piles to where they should be, and then continue with the scar lock and build the embankment behind the scar lock to the RCMP building. I hope.
You're saying where they should be. Shouldn't they be where the original plan was, that they were down there? The piles have been pushed down somehow? Like, is this going to last forever, or is it just you're chopping them off to where they stopped at instead of forcing them down?
The most important thing for us is about retaining the soil behind
Right,
the
exactly.
embankment. So why do we have to go, for example, if you look at our original designs, we are about 3-4 meters from its existing embankment. The reason is we have done dredging in the past. And that dredging has happened, especially the embankment is failing really because we have impacted the toe. We have gone too far into the embankment as a result. That's the main reason that we see the failure of the bank in the first place. It wouldn't be there had it not been for the dredging. So now we have to ensure that wherever we have dredged, we should be building from the underside of where the dredging happened and build up. So our original designs are based on that. But what the sheet pile does is it goes further below that. It goes to about 10 meters, another 8 meters, for example, from the underside, so that any potential slipping of the RCMP building and the bank that's supporting it would never happen.
Okay, it never will.
Councillor Wilkinson, make sure you're adjusting your comments to the chair.
I think to kind of add to that or simplify it, it's if you've ever been camping and put in tent pegs and you put in one peg and then you move 3 feet over and try and put in another peg, and the ground can be incredibly different even over just short spaces, and so that's why you're putting in one sheet pile may go this far, the next one may only go this far. It just really depends on the condition of the earth below
Through the
it.
chair, we've had the same thing at Parkland Lodge though, exactly, like they ran into this big boat that was the size of a Volkswagen. But they have securely anchored it, and I'm just curious I hope this is securely done, that's the main thing, because soil here is very unpredictable.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Chenard and then Councillor Bevan.
My problem is this thing first started at 690, then we come back and we added another 260, so there's just about $1 million, and now we're at 70. When we're figuring out, when we're actually figuring out this job, shouldn't we have took some care in doing this?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But no, I'm saying, shouldn't we have took some care, and if the contractor saying, okay, we all understand soil conditions are very different, but when they're putting them in, where does this end? Is it 70, or are we gonna, in a month from now, the contractor comes back, or somebody did not price it right? If they can't pound them in, then they should, I think, have some of the cost, as was mentioned, of cutting them off.
Exactly.
So where I don't like this whole thing, we're throwing a blank check at this, we shouldn't have paid in the first place for it, I believe the province, but the town took responsibility. But where is this gonna end? It's 260, 70, 1 month from now, is the contractor gonna come back and say, sorry, I goofed up again, and I'm looking at these pictures look like galvanized, nice metal. There, I looked at it, it is untreated steel, so if we're leaving anything stick out of the ground, it's going to rust, or we gotta paint it. We have no choice but bury them, or they're not gonna look like these pictures that we're showing.
Go ahead, Mr. Solomon.
Through the chair, yes, they look a bit rusty, but they have coating. I can assure you that. But the thing is, if you want to have that pleasing look, like on the photos that you see,
Correct.
there will be an element now of maintenance, because you have to paint them every so often. Otherwise, the rustiness that you see will not be changing. It's going to be exactly what you see, because there is that coating that helps it not to rot or rust any further. So I hope I have answered that question.
No, you did answer it, but my biggest question, when is the cost gonna end? Because every time we turn around, we all understand soil conditions, but every time we turn around, the true cost is not 690, it's going up and up and up. Is this going to end?
Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, I guess, I had a problem with this. I don't understand why, through the chair, sorry, that the contractor was unforeseen for these piles to be cut off. If you remember a hospital or anything else that you pile driving that, you always got to trim piles. It doesn't matter where you at. That should have been in his price to us, that this was a possibility that we're going to have to trim these piles. So for him to say it was an unforeseen cost, I don't believe that for a minute. Because if he had put sheet piles in, or any other piles, any place in his businesses that he has done with people, he knows he had to cut them off. I can guarantee you, you're never going to get 80 piles all to the same length. You're going to have to cut, no matter what, or you may have to add to go down another 10 feet, one of the two. So for him to say this is an unforeseen cost, I don't want to pay it. I don't think it is. It should have been in his bid here that we may have to trim.
You're absolutely right. Piles are designed to be cut for one particular reason, because how piles are driven is after you heat the soft through the chair up through the soft ground, then you heat what's known as a till. Nobody exactly knows at what rate that till is penetrated. If that till was to be penetrated at the rate that we are looking for, then it will drive itself to where we would want it, anchoring the depths that we are looking for. Now with that, considering this whole thing is back to council, is because the kind of material that we have in that location is very soft. We cannot really do away until the ground is really frozen. We could have, by the way, if the weather was what we expect it to be, we will not even go into the sheet piles. But just to stick to what you have asked me, you normally have, for example, we didn't go and buy a 15 feet sheet pile. We say, look, the 12 meter, as long as we can anchor it to where we want it, because the geotechnical report says we can anchor it for another 3 meters, which make it a total of 15 feet, 15 meters pile. We went for a 12 meter. We said if we anchor it just 1 meter will be sufficient. Now, instead of anchoring it 1 meter, we cannot even penetrate it. Now, that's now despite, I can open it here, what the report exactly says. Now, if you cannot penetrate it at all, when you have thought you can at least cut through it, 1 meter into that clay till, let alone that, where we have considered to be a soft ground all the way that 12 meter, we're not having that. That simply says of the uneven. Maybe the other thing I need to add is the intrusiveness, the number of tests that you do when you're constructing a very important building are much more deeper than the kind of test you do for a simple this is not a load bearing pile. It's just supporting anything that's thrown to it behind it. Therefore, the number of tests or the intrusiveness that you have to do is very limited. Otherwise, it'll be costly in comparison to the project size. So I'm not trying to defend anyone or anything, but it makes, for me to accept it, makes a lot more sense because I'm a privy to the geotechnical report. And also the reviews that was done by many other people. It's not just one that we went and talked. There are different sheet pile driving companies that we talked to.
All right, Councilor Levin, you have a follow-up? And then Councilor Curry?
No,
and then Councilor
through the chair, I know what you're saying on that, but I challenge you, or him, the constructor, contractor, to tell me where there was, say, 20 or 30 sheet piles put in at all the same length, where there wasn't some trimming. He should have had it in his bid to us saying that he may have to do some trimming on there because they will not align up, so it's going to cost an extra $20,000, $30,000 or $40,000 onto that. And if he didn't have to trim it, then we're safe. But now, I could have guaranteed you were going to trim and that. But I know where you're coming from, Dowd, but I just get upset with this that every time I turn around, we're spending money, because either it's not in the bid contract or whatever's coming out. And like Councilor Schnarr said, where do we end up with a thing? A $5 million project or whatever? I'm exaggerating, but it's,
Okay. Just a reminder, Council, please address your comments through the chair. Mr. Solomon, go ahead.
Yes, so just to explain what's happening here, because I can really feel your concern, Councillor, and you deserve an appropriate answer. So like I said, we are originally to penetrate 3 meters into the clay tier. But for the kind of structure that we're installing, we don't need to penetrate 3 meters. So we are in charge. So wherever we want it to be, we are in charge. That's what's supposed to be from the geotechnical information. Because it's 3 meters that we can penetrate, but we are not even scratching the surface. That's now despite what the geotechnical report says. Now, if, for example, we have a set, by all means we have to go, penetrate more than 3 meters, then it will depend on what we are achieving. It's called refusal criteria. Whatever we are achieving will be dependent. Then what Councillor Bevan said is exactly right. We have to go back in those situations that we have to go back and cut. But that's not the situation for us. Since we don't need to penetrate 3 meters, but we have the soil conditions tell us that we can penetrate 3 meters. The natural thing to say is, look, I can put the piles exactly where I want. Inside the till, not on the top. The top can be very disillusional. But underside, one is 1 meter, the other is 2 meters, that is if it's a wavy clay down there. And then you'll have you can control and put an exact height that you don't really need to cut. That I'm very clear. I mean, I can talk this before of any geotechnical person. And I assure you, I will not change what I'm telling you.
Okay, Councillor Curry, Councillor Sorensen, Councillor Byer, and then Councillor Schnarr.
All right. I don't have any questions. Be happy. I am not in support of paying to do the extra. I actually do believe that beautification is the eye of the beholder, and I'm a fan of the look of industrial in certain areas, and I think it brings a totally different appearance to it. And I saw that when we were down in the East Coast at FCM, that they do a lot better job of not over beautifying things with grass and such. And I also know that that bank is on the east end or going east. So on the highway, unless you're being a distracted, dangerous driver, you wouldn't actually see it because you'd have to turn your head to see it. So realistically, the view of that is when you are going to the dump or the landfill, which however, the train, you might get a longer view of it. But I just think for $70,000 of taxpayers' dollars, I am comfortable with this look, and I think that it can be beautiful, and I think some will think that this is a beautiful look, and others will not, but I think that will go both ways.
All right, Councillor Sorensen and then Councillor Byer.
First off, a statement and then a question. My statement is I wouldn't want that exposed sheet pile to be covered in rust, so if we can hear another option to, I don't know, paint it or something, but I don't want 100 meters of rusty sheet metal sticking out in the park. My second question is, if we do the cheaper option and we don't use Skyrock at all, does that weaken the stability of the bank, or can the sheet pile handle the load on its own without the Skyrock behind it?
It can. So what we are doing is, when you go back and cut the sheet pile, if we have to install a Skyrock, then we will compensate in terms of depth of the sheet pile on where we cut. Otherwise, instead of, for example, cutting it about 0.6 of a meter, we lift about 0.6 of a meter, it will be exactly at the height of the Skyrock. So if you don't want to go with the Skyrock, for example, the only cost that we don't know of and that we need to know is the beam cap, the thing on top.
If I may add as well, there's one additional option that we just don't have pricing for yet, but there's a gabion, is that the right term there? And I don't know, Dowd, if you want to comment on that, but my point is simply is that we're looking for other options. This option would be more of like a rock. They would be basketed rocks, basically. That's another option. I don't believe Dowd's fully reviewed that yet. Simply just want to make sure council knows that we're certainly open to and looking for alternatives that will bear the balance between cost effectiveness and obviously finishing this project appropriately.
No, I think.
Go ahead.
I think we have received an email from the contractor telling us, if we can do this, looks like this. But he only gives you 1/4 of the information. So I have gone back to him asking him to give us the complete information. This is a gabion. This is what we used when we tendered. Can this one come on? When we did the first tender with a company called Unsurpassable. They were the only bidders at the time. And it's because the cost of gabion, because lifting, there are much more heavier things and all that, is a massive thing. Therefore, what I've asked is the contractor gave us a price for a gabion basket per linear meter. The basket in itself has a price, then filling it with rock has a price. So I've asked him to give us the full complete price. And he has also attached some photographs. It looks fairly okay, but then it's the element of cost. So once we are very clear about the cost, that too definitely we brought back to us. It's not that we've not tried guidance in the past. This is the first tender drawing that we used when we did the first round of the tender. Reason that we went with a more geo solution before we went to pile is because that is more lasting, because the gabions, the wire rusts and falls off. The other one does not. It stays there forever, vegetating. And so that's where the reason that we went into a geo solution instead of a steel gabion. So it's not something that we have not tried in the past, but it will make it cheaper. It doesn't look very bad. So once we know a complete cost for that gabion, we'll definitely come back to council with that information.
All right, thank you. Councillor Byer and then Councillor Chenard.
Through the chair, I've got two comments and then a question. With Councillor Bevan's comment there about the sheet piles, I don't understand why that. It seems like it's an add-on cost to cut it off. I just don't understand that. From a geological point of view, you look at the mountains and everything's all wavy, so I would assume that the different soils would be different, everywhere in the world, right? Not just here. And then to comment on Councillor Curry's, I also think that the exposed sheet piles is actually kind of nice looking on its own as well. So I don't actually think it's that unpleasing. I did have a question though. So in the initial 690,000 bid, then was what you just mentioned here, the initial cost that was going to be within that 690 to deal with the embankment in the end? Like I just, so if we're not doing something like this, then if we're saving that there, then wouldn't we put that money onto the new suggestion?
Councillor Barr, I think this has to do with the original tender, because we bid this project twice. So I don't know if this was in the second
okay.
But
round
I think I can
of
also
tendering.
address that, Your
Go ahead.
Worship,
See you
there
there,
as
Tom.
well. Is there was basically a trade-off when we went from the scour lock structures that are somewhat like what is shown here to the sheet piles. It was basically a trade-off in cost. So
okay.
what it would have costed us to do the scour lock solutions, it traded that cost to the sheet pile. So that was basically a wash there.
So this color lock is if Kella helps me again, I'll be very happy to show you this color.
Go ahead.
Through the chair. So wasn't a part of that $260,000 because we also needed the sheet piles as well, not just a trade-off? Isn't that like an increase in cost? Like the sheet piles cost more, so then that's why we had to have the 260, not just a trade-off of one finish to the next.
Thank you. I think Dawit may be better to answer that question.
Yeah, I think I can provide this information or an explanation on this one. Kella, I want to make it a little bigger and not very easy to see.
Hold control and use the mouse.
Oh, yeah. Can you make it bigger? So just focusing on the foundation. So on this second round of bid, the first one is a gabion, you saw it, and it was very expensive considering all the conditions the other contractor also put. It's over $1 million. I can provide it to the CAO for him to review. This one, for this tender, the structure that we have, which I can also open, but the only thing that's remaining here is another lift of scour lock up here. So instead of 5 scour lock boxes like this that we see, there is a sixth one. So what we did was, now this is revision 2. By the way, we have done, there is a tender or the bidded details, and then after that we have done a design change. This design change is necessitated because the contractor cannot control seepage and sloughing. Therefore we said, you know what, you're not going to improve subgrade down there. What we are going to allow you is, you're going to put all those liners that are needed and then throw big stones. And this is what it's showing. These are big stones without them having to rework the basement, the subgrade, because there's no chance that they can do that. It was very clear. I mean, the details on that can be provided. So what we did was we get a bigger foundation and moved this whole structure down by about 1 scour lock height, which would have been a 1.2 meter, just like this one's a 1.2. So what we did is we removed that, and we have a very sharp sloped section, a short distance, that will just grow with willows and whatever, nobody will be going there to mow it, and then flatten the rest so that our public works would be able to mow and make it easier. So if you look, if I open the first before the change, that's now a scour look like this and a much more flatter right from the beginning. So this necessitated no cost. All we did was to improve the situation for the contractor to be able to do his work. That is done only in support of the contractor. Because if we insist that we do what we're looking for, which will mean this whole structure is lifted a little, down a little, but the subgrade down here, they have to improve the subgrade itself, because the kind of material that's used here, unlike the other one, or the former one, which if you're very curious and interested, I can open right now, is a different material that needs compaction and achieving compaction, and they will never achieve that. So we went with this one, reduced because of the additional work that we are doing at the foundation, remove the scour lock so that the top scour lock can compensate for the cost of the work that we are doing at the foundation. Therefore, there was no change in cost. It is now this other one. Now, I think I have to open the pile drawing, the last drawing that's given to the contractor, to be able to now compare what we are doing before and now. So, should I push it in? I'm just going to drag you over all this, but I think it's important that you know what these changes are all about. So instead of going to the depth of excavation that you saw before, with the sheet pile driven, now this whole thing, this whole structure is lifted further up. So, in fact, to the levels, to the elevation where the contractor has already dug and managed to dig, about 70 meters out of the total 110 meters. So this is what we're going in now. Once we drive the sheet pile, then it will not take any time. But then this cost, the sheet pile cost, and the cost of a little bit different material here, and the fact that we have to strengthen the embankment with additional geotextiles, have added this additional money that we came to you for. But that's not it. I have also looked into the contractor's claim to the extent that's allowable within the contract. These details would have to come out, because if you talk to the contractor, he'd feel very differently about this. Therefore, this is what we came to you with additional budget for.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Councillor Byer?
I hope I'm not complicating things. It's much more easier to visualize when it is on the drawing.
Go ahead, Councillor Chouinard.
Okay, with the information that we're gathering, tonight, I think we should defeat this motion, go back to the contractor and your information, and bring us a true final cost, because I'm getting tired of these surprises. So we should defeat this, go back, show us what the end result is, because unlike the other ones, I don't want to see old rusted steel there. I want it to look good. So I'm voting against this simply because I want a final cost. I don't want a month from now the contractor comes back and says, but to finish, so I'm voting against this. I want a final cost brought to me.
All right. Any other further questions, comments, or concerns?
Got lost, but no.
My comment is I have no idea what the heck's going on. This is very confusing. Are we talking, because there's mentioning of cutting the sheet piles, is this money that is being requested for that, or is it being requested for the landscaping, which is what's being discussed here in the memo? Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is what we're looking at. If we have the numbers now for cutting the piles where we want them to be, and there is this additional money that the contractor wants to be paid, the two combined can be compensated by removing the scour log, the final lift, that lift that you see up there.
Okay.
That scour log. So if we don't want that, for example, that money would cater for the cutting, will cater for, that's now only on council's direction and instruction, the 40,000 or so that this contractor is asking. The only cost that we don't have, when we will not be able to tell you, is the capping there, because we don't have it. And to your points, councillors, because it was raised that you're absolutely right. We are coming to you with half-cooked information. That was not the intent. The contractor apparently has complained and has had a lot of talk. I don't know which councillor, and also that has been brought to the attention of the CAO, who brought us and gave us an audience to give our all the information that we have, the grievances of the contractor, which rightfully should be heard. And as much as without giving into too much details, which I'll be very happy to provide, what I think about this whole thing. So it was then agreed, look, we can take that there is some saving to council, and let's see how council directs. But as indicated in the memo itself, it says that we are yet to crunch and come up with the final numbers. So I would prefer really that we, but then that definitely appeased the contractor at the time. So I think that's why we came to you today.
Okay. Councillor Sorensen.
Real quick question. If we do not make a decision today, is all work at a halt right now?
Yeah, so that's the point I was just going to make there, and Dawit, please add to this. One of the reasons that we brought this forward was so that work could continue to progress. The contractor will soon be at a point where they will need to know which direction we're going to take, because it will affect the next steps of the project. I don't know, Dawit, if you can appropriately say what costs are associated with the contractor waiting for a week or not. But that's just the last piece of, I think council would want to consider before making a decision. Administratively, I honestly have no problem with Councillor Chenard's say, hey, we're just not quite sure what this is. We want to wait for more information. The only piece I have to that is that just may be in a delay of the project. It's not the time that I'm worried about. It's the potential for there to be additional costs. And Dawit, perhaps you can try to articulate that.
I think it's exactly what you said. It's definitely the contractor feels that he's heard, and that's what he wanted. For me, I've been keeping him, not yet. We will review this whole claim that you're submitting as per the contracts that you have signed, and then anything that's like human, for example, the last time I was here, I have reported that his machines are parked. They do definitely cost him. Therefore, there are these elements that I can ultimately bring to council. But I don't think he trusts me that I will truly bring it to you. And so he chose to see one of you and also the CAO. That's what happened. And for us to get some kind of guideline, I agree with the CAO, like, you know what, don't exceed this. Meantime, please come back to us. Then definitely we can do that.
Okay, Councillor Byer and then Councillor Bevan.
Through the chair to Mr. Solomon. So if we defeated the motion tonight, would we be able to hold a special meeting before our committee meeting next week if we have some more information? Is that within reason to ask for that?
Sure, thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, that's certainly an option that would be considerable, for sure.
All right, Councillor Bevan.
Through chair to administration, I'd just like to make a point that I think, we're going around with some of these things here and that. And I think that to stop some of this going, that we put a time limit on some of these constructions that are going on. And if the contractor's gonna go over, then there is some kind of penalty to these contractors. Otherwise, if they had to pay something back, say we put a year time limit on it, they go over by a year and a half, you know what, then we should be recouping something from them. Because this can go on and on and on. I know we don't have anything like that, other places do it. I don't know if we want to go down that road or not, according to Commissioner Turcott here.
I think I can answer that, Councillor Bevan, through the chair. The thing is, yes, like any other contract, there's penalty that will be applied to a contractor if the delay is as a result of his failure to do things. The delay that we are having today is not only he's making, there are complaints, but not just only he's making. The weather has put a big factor into this whole thing. This is the kind of weather that we have not expected in mid-January, early January, mid-January. So he has very good reason for delays, but he cannot he's not able to claim any money as a result of the weather and his machines being stationary because the contract does not allow him. But he can rightfully ask for an extension of time, and that's what we have provided him.
If I would just add to that as well, I think it's really important. The key there is if the contractor is prepared to move forward, but we're not prepared to move forward, then that fault lies with us, not with the contractor.
For sure. I understand that.
Okay,
What's the motion?
Yeah.
so hang on. So, final comment for me is, I'm not prepared to vote in favor of this. And we have an in-camera item to discuss this further, and maybe after that we might settle on something, but at this point I'm not. I am not happy with this, how this project has twisted and turned, and you know, we're talking about this a week after we just approved $260,000 extra for this project. But also, I think we also need to be cognizant of that we've bid this project twice, and we've only had one firm come forward each time. And if we don't move forward, we could find ourselves in a world of hurt here, folks. So we need to get this thing done, but we can have further discussions in camera. But at this point, I'm not in favor of discussing this or voting in favor of this. So I'll call the question. I'll repeat what the motion is. The motion is that council authorize the lowest cost option for the Bench Creek stabilization project. The lowest cost option, which I think is intended to be the 40,000.
The exposed sheet pile.
The exposed sheet piling,
Which is a savings.
which is,
With all costs considered, puts us really, really close to the existing budget.
okay, so that would put us, I'll see, now that makes my,
I'll just read it back.
Sure.
It was moved by Councillor Sorensen that council proceed with the lower cost option being a less natural, aesthetically pleasing finish with exposed metal sheet piles in order to stay within the existing budget.
so that is the motion. I will actually vote in favor of that.
Yes.
But I'm gonna make it very clear, don't come back to me with any more cost. Because this is getting absolutely ridiculous. I do understand you don't have the final costs on the capping, right? Do you have any idea of where that would land, or if that would be within the existing budget?
I have asked the contractor to submit those numbers, and like you rightly said, I don't want to come back. If I tell you a number, which I
Yeah.
I might, then it's always the contractor's number that we live by. And I think I will hold on that, because I don't want to come back.
Yeah.
If I may, my administrative opinion, honestly, at this point is to defeat these motions and wait for additional information. I think that is the best course of action here. I think it's clear that there may be some additional pieces that may have significant influence on how council feels about the completion of this project. As long as council is just mindful of the fact that time is a part of that equation.
All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Motion defeated unanimously. All right, something a little easier. Can I get a motion, please, that council accept for information the 72-hour emergency preparedness kit brochure? Councilor Shedard makes that motion, and Mr. Schramm, if you want to come up and explain.
I know I was reading the list and it's like, oh, okay. Does it come with the pocket change? So. Cash and something else.
Welcome back, Councilor Wilkinson. We've missed you.
And I don't think we voted you off the island.
Thanks for the opportunity to bring this information forward. Before we talk about the kit, really want to give you a brief presentation on a little bit about emergency preparedness and why the importance of having these kits so critical. So really, our main messaging is, are you prepared? Emergency preparedness, what does that really mean? Right? Really, we ask our people, we want you to think about when a disaster happens or a major emergency, you should be prepared to be self-sufficient in your community for 72 hours. Right? And there are basic steps that you can do to do that. You have to understand, emergency services, depending on the nature of the emergency, may not be able to get to you. So, if an emergency happens in your community, you can take those workers, it's quite some time to get there, so we want you to be prepared. And there are basic steps that you can do to protect yourselves and your family. First thing is know the risks. Although the consequences of various disasters can be similar, knowing the risks in our region can help you prepare better. And specifically in Alberta, we know we face a number of hazards. Tornadoes, right? They happen quickly, and we've seen them in our community, are very close to our community. And of course, the big one that we all have to be always aware of is wildfires. They can threaten the community and they can really restrict movement. Heavy rains can cause significant overland flooding. We have experienced that in our community. I've experienced that personally back in 2002. And in addition to the natural disasters, there are other risks, such as power outages, industrial and major transportation incidents. We all need to prepare for all these types of hazards at all the time. We need to be prepared. We ask people to make a plan. Really, every household needs an emergency plan, no different than at workplaces. It will help you and your family know what to do should an emergency arise, and it can only take as little as 20 minutes to make a plan. You can have some simple things, right? Your family may not be together when an emergency occurs, so plan how to meet or how to contact one another and discuss what you should do in different situations. Those are various key concepts in making an emergency plan. They'll go a long ways. Have an emergency kit. In an emergency, you will need some basic supplies. You may need to get by without power or even tap water. Be prepared to be self-sufficient for at least 72 hours, and that's the key message. You may have some items already in your household, such as food, water, a battery operated or a wind-up flashlight. It's important. The key is to make sure that they're organized and easy to find. Would you be able to find your flashlight if it's completely dark in your household? Be aware of it. And make sure your kit is easy to carry and everyone in the household knows where it's at, because not everybody might not be there. Keep it in a backpack, duffel bag, or a suitcase with wheels, and easy to reach, an accessible place, the front hall closet. If you have many different people in your household, your emergency could get heavy if you have multiple people. So it's a good idea to separate some of the items and the supplies into backpacks or little kits like this. That way, your kit can be more portable, and each person can personalize his or her own grab-and-go emergency kit. Building the kit. This is the fun part. In an emergency, you will need some basic supplies. Your kit should contain enough supplies to keep you and your family safe and comfortable, again, for that minimum 72 hours. They come in all shapes and sizes, and you need to store your kit at home, again, like we've already said, in an easy, accessible spot. Your basic emergency kit should have at least the following items. At least 2 liters of water per person, food that won't spoil, a manual can opener potentially, a flashlight, a radio, extra batteries to those, first aid kit, extra keys to the house and car, cash in smaller bills is recommended, and a copy of emergency plan and contact information so you have that information available. And keep in mind, prescription meds, baby foods, and food and water for your pets, also important. There are additional items which you may want to add to your kits. And again, additional water, candles, lighters, extra clothing, footwear, sleeping bag, or warmth, depending on the weather. Hand sanitizer, utensils, garbage bags, TP, some purifying tablets potentially, and other basic tools. So, how can we help you? The Town of Edson Protective Service Department, in partnership with Citizens on Patrol, has sourced and purchased these 72-hour emergency kit bags for our residents. The bag will come with a recommended list of items for the citizens that they want to add to it. We've got 200 of these, and they can be picked up at the town office or the fire hall, and it's a proud project funded through a Public Safety Initiative program. Thank you.
All right, I'll open the floor to questions and comments. Councillor Chenard.
So these bags are gonna become free of charge?
They are free to, sorry, through the chair?
Go ahead.
These are free to our residents, free of charge.
And there's 200 bags.
200 bags.
So it's first come, first served. I mean, I like the idea on the information. I don't know who sponsored them. It's a good thing, but I do like the information that people are aware. And now, is this list, it'll be online because now we're all on the town website. So anyone wanting to make one of these bags, they can. I believe the information is very valuable. Most people are not aware because you're living in your house and all of a sudden a disaster. Like I also through the flood that threw everyone for a week.
Go ahead, Mr. Trent.
Through the chair, the bags are provided in the bag. We also have a list. We will have that checklist provided in the bag. And again, the list is a guideline. You can personalize it however you see fit, but the list we provide are some of the essentials that we believe you should have in there.
Also shout out the list only. There's nothing else in the bag. It's
Correct.
just the bag and the list, and then people would have to
This is
build
our-
the kits themselves.
That's our sample bag.
And a big part of this initiative is to just bring awareness to this situation.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, thanks to Citizens for Protective Services. I think it's just a great idea. My son was in Fort McMurray when they had to evacuate, and really, I think there in Fort McMurray somehow through planning, people knew what they were doing, because a lot of them worked, I think, in jobs where they had first aid training, but a lot of us could panic, I think, and it would be very nice to be prepared.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to Mr. Schramm, do we, if we only have 200 bags, do we have additional paperwork that if people come, they can just have like the lists available if they don't want to print it offline? Or?
Yep, through the chair, absolutely. We have the list available. Our goal is if the launch of this project goes very successfully, we can look at purchasing further bags throughout the year to accommodate the needs of our residents.
Okay. Good.
All right. Any other further questions or comments?
Thank you.
I
Go
just
ahead.
hope we don't see a bunch of them at the gym. That's
I was wondering how my KitchenAid is gonna fit in that bag. Who's taking it?
I think you could fit Matt the cat in there, so you're
That
okay.
can fit, the Justice on her own.
Thank you, Mr. Schramm, and I think it's a very important thing for our community, especially as we look at issues such as mountain pine beetle and some of the risks associated with that. Yeah, we also have a major rail line that comes through our community, so thank you very much.
One last thing, I would suggest we do have bags in the town office tonight, so if council so chooses, they can grab a bag and a list for themselves
Thank you.
and start your kit.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council appoint Mayor Zahara, Deputy Mayor Curry, Councillor Sorensen, and CO Derricott to negotiate the operations agreement between the town of Edson and the Edson District Recycling Society. Councillor Byer will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Go ahead, Councillor Chenard.
My question is, who came up with this list? And what I see absent is somebody maybe with previous experience in the recycling board should have been considered. So how did this list come up?
Councillor Chenard, I came up with the list, and we do have previous experience there. We have the Recycling Society Board that is going to be there to provide their feedback. I think it's important that the mayor and the deputy mayor, as well as the rep of that committee, be at that on that steering committee or that negotiating committee. Any agreement that comes forward obviously would have to be ratified by the entire council. So
The second part of my question, if negotiations goes farther, then will it always be deputy mayor on the board?
yes,
Okay, well.
that's the intent, to have the deputy mayor.
Okay, but then we're, I guess, a question, because the next in rotation, then it goes to Councillor Sorensen, so therefore he'll be a double member. I'm just looking outside the box.
Well, we're supposed to have the operational agreement by April 1st, so that shouldn't be a concern. Councillor
Question was
Bevan?
asked and answered.
All right, any other further questions, comments, or concerns? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Council committee reports. And we are going back until,
July, or January 15th,
we are going back until January 15th. You are correct, Councillor Chenard. And we will start with Councillor Byer.
Thank you. So So I just had one meeting. I had the Edson and District Public Library Board meeting on Wednesday, January 16th. And we had some discussion on our anniversary party, which was the following week, which was very successful. We had some great presentations and a nice start kickoff celebration for our 75th anniversary. And the board is getting prepared for their financial statements coming up. But we are noting that we're expecting a general surplus, unrestricted surplus, due to a special formula that the Yellowhead County Library Board has with the Edson and District Library Board with patrons and usage, and that came out in our favor this year. But we haven't received the funds yet for that. We won't receive that until 2019, so we're expecting a surplus from them.
All right, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Councillor Bevan.
Just one on the 31st and IRC meeting, and that is my report.
All right, thank you, Councillor Bevan. Councillor Sorensen.
How far back are we going again?
January 15th.
So we did do the wastewater treatment
I
plant.
can't mention that.
No, that's not a committee.
January 24th, we had an Edson District Recycling Society meeting. We looked at preliminary numbers for their 2018 financial year. And it looks like they had the preliminary numbers anyways, looks like they had a profitable year. So that's big news. And I don't believe I have anything else to report today.
All right, Councillor Curry.
Due to the weather, we canceled meetings. So,
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
Well, actually, January 18th, I had a town conference all for vacation, 2 hours of my holiday.
where were you?
In Africa, sitting, yeah, on Facebook, on the phone.
It was great, it was good.
All right, and then today's steering committee, a meeting about multiplex.
All right, thank you. You're dedicated. If I was in Africa, I don't think I'd be doing that.
Well, it's necessary.
Councillor Chouinard.
Are we allowed to report that we had committee of the whole meeting on January 22nd?
No.
Well, then, my only meeting at the last minute, my Pineville meeting, January 31st, was canceled. For no apparent reason, just canceled.
Okay.
I have nothing to report.
All right. And I had a number of events, but I can't report on that. So just the steering committee meeting today. And that is my report. Go ahead, Councillor
I
Chouinard.
just have one comment. Somewhere along the line when we do our planning, can we change this? Because I believe to the public it is important that we report the information that we were at events. So we should add this to the list, and when we have our meeting, we should
Okay,
change it.
Councillor Chouinard, we've discussed this at strategic planning. It's been dealt with. We're not discussing it again.
So just a comment.
Moving on, any other questions? Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to Councillor Sorensen, can you elaborate at all on the Edson and District Recycling Society, if how the funds that came in as an emergency at the end of last year, how that ends up with, you said they ended up very well in 2018. Is that because of the money that we approved for them, or like I'm a little confused?
I still don't have a clear picture on it. I did ask that question, and the response to me was that grants came in, they received more grants than they expected.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
Sorry, through the chair, speaking of grants, then they did get a grant to start like a rebuild place like Habitat for Humanity, sort of where they can buy construction goods.
In 2019, so it's different financial year, they have been informed that they received a grant to start that reuse center.
Excellent. Okay, because we talked about that quite a few years ago.
But they
so
haven't
good.
received the money yet. They've just
Okay.
received notification.
Such a plus in town if we could get rid of our extra tiles and hardwood and whatever.
All right. Sounds good. We have no financial reports. Questions for media and public regarding items from today's council meeting. Go ahead, Mr. Moore.
Please refresh me on what decision was made on the Bench Creek tonight, and what happens next.
Okay, so the decision was made that we are not expending any additional funds until we get further information. And once we get that information, then I'm sure administration will bring that forward. We have an in-camera item to discuss this project as well, which may bring some information to light. So, yeah, so it's kind of see as you go, status quo.
How will we be able to get information after the in camera?
Unless there's a motion, no, it'll be an in-camera item, but if there's any money decisions in terms of increasing that budget, then absolutely, either after this meeting or in a future council meeting, then at that time you'll be able to provide that information.
I would just add, administration's not anticipating any motion coming out of that. It's more informational. It doesn't mean it can't happen, just so that you can know it's not anticipated.
All right, go ahead.
Second question, about the Recycling Society, why April 1st?
That was a number that was put in when we approved the additional funds, emergency funds at the end of last year in order to get an agreement in place. Obviously, council always has the ability to extend that if they so wish, but in speaking with the chair of the Recycling Society, we both are the feeling that we want to get this complete and move forward, so we both organizations can move forward on the same wavelength, and this is really an opportunity to renew our relationship moving forward. So,
Thank you.
all right. No other questions? No. Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion, please, that we move in camera? Councillor Byer will make that motion, and we'll just have a quick 5-minute bathroom break, smoke break. Oh, all those in favor? Motion carried.
If the doors are open, ready to go?
Can I get a motion, please, for adjournment?
I can do that.
Councillor Chenard makes that motion. All those in favor? Motion carried.